Good morning. This is Molly McKee. I'm glad to finally be presenting my research to you guys. My research study was entitled Integrating Technology Resources into Secondary Mathematics Learning. I'm going to start off with a brief overview of the literature and the purpose that was driving me to research this topic. And then I'll delve right into the data I collected, the analysis, and my overall finding. So first, a little bit about me. I received my bachelor's from Emory University. I went back to school to get my master's in secondary mathematics education from the University of Georgia, and I received my specialist in education with a concentration in secondary mathematics from the University of West Georgia. My first job after completing my master's was at Heard County High School in Heard County, and it was an excellent experience. And then recently, within the past 5 years, I've moved to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and I am now teaching at Socastee High School, also mathematics. I am gifted and talented certified, and I have the AP Statistics endorsement. As an educator, I have two professional objectives that I try to follow on a daily basis. And the first one is to support educators as they create a welcoming learning environment for their students, which encourages creativity and higher order thinking in a way that increases students' performance and engagement. I also like to try to help teachers identify needs for their classrooms, regardless of their content area, and guide them in the development of strategies to improve teaching and learning through appropriate implementation of innovative educational technology. That's why, as a mathematics teacher, this research was so important to me, because I wanted to see what teachers of secondary mathematics feel is the most important and effective way to implement and combine technology, content, and teaching strategies. I also wanted to see how they felt professional development was assisting them and what areas the professional development is lacking. The purpose of this study was to measure the preparedness of secondary mathematics teachers in the areas of content, pedagogy, and technology, and to determine if these teachers feel the provided professional development adequately trains and prepares them to use emerging technologies in the classroom. There were 3 research questions guiding this research. The first was, how do the technological pedagogical content knowledge, or TPAC levels, vary across secondary mathematics teachers in South Carolina? What technological pedagogical content knowledge is identified by these secondary mathematics teachers as essential for effectively teaching mathematics? And last, do secondary mathematics teachers feel they are provided with adequate professional development in regards to incorporating technology and pedagogical strategies into the mathematics curriculum? So in recent years, there's been an influx of a variety of electronic resources that can help engage students while simultaneously increasing their comprehension. These tools can support investigations by students in every area of mathematics, and when they're provided, less focus can be placed on pure computation and more emphasis can be placed on decision-making, critical thinking, reflection, reasoning, and problem solving. Their learning experience now involve more complex interactions that they're going to see in the real world, more complex interactions between learners and instructional content. The computers that they're provided with present information in a wide variety of forms. You can print, you can watch videos, you can hear audio, you can play games. Students can access a variety of blogs or social media. There's social networking, and they can communicate with kids not just at their school or teachers not just in their immediate area. The types of problems and feedback available to teachers and students has expanded. Teachers can reach out to other colleagues across the country, across the world. Learners can easily link to various content previously unavailable. There's a wide variety of mathematical tools geared at helping students excel in mathematics. Large amounts of information are able to be stored and transported easily. For example, a Google Drive can house tons of information both for content delivery and for projects or student portfolios. Since the 1980s, the instructional technology field has expanded and changed. The field is constantly evolving with the introduction of new technologies. Since 1995, there has also been a significant increase in the amount of technology available to students, both at home and in schools. Some advances have transformed how technology is being utilized. However, more technology in the schools does not automatically mean it is being used for instructional purposes. Still, the use of instructional media continues to grow in a variety of situations, from business to the military to secondary and higher education. Some of these modern instructional developments are a utilization of the internet, distance education opportunities, online education opportunities, learner-centered learning environments, Web 2.0 tools as demonstrated on this adjusted Bloom's taxonomy, and virtual environments such as Facebook, wikis, and blogs. So in this Bloom's taxonomy, the original creating, evaluating, analyzing, applying, understanding, and remembering has been adjusted to reflect all of the technologies that can be integrated into each level of Bloom's. Remembering that creating ultimately is the goal we want to have with our students, whether it's using technology or not, and that remembering is where we start. One of the research questions driving this study was, how do the TPAC levels vary across secondary mathematics teachers in South Carolina? So TPAC offers a theoretical framework for incorporating technology into the classroom effectively. The framework for teacher knowledge includes interactions between each area, the areas of content knowledge, pedagogy, and technology. When combined, properly trained educators can effectively and appropriately integrate technology into the classrooms, enhancing student learning and the potential for student exploration. The four intersections are significant for enhancing teaching and learning, and it has the potential to provide a lens through which educators and researchers can focus on the skills needed for teachers to meaningfully incorporate technology into their instruction. As technology becomes more prevalent and accessible in society, the need for adequately preparing teachers to properly use technology in the classroom for content delivery and instruction becomes more and more important. Understanding the importance and the meaning of each intersection of the elements of the TPAC framework benefits educators by allowing them to focus on each individual overlap. These four intersections are significant for enhancing teaching and learning. So these domains that are created from the three initial knowledge points are pedagogical content knowledge, technological content knowledge, technological pedagogical knowledge, and technological pedagogical content knowledge. So TPAC is a culmination of the three main components, and it ultimately refers to the association or correlation between a teacher's understanding of the content or the curriculum, the instructional tools and methods, and how they use technology in their teaching. And an effective teaching strategy would seamlessly combine content, teaching strategies, and technology. It would require a teacher to have an understanding of teaching methods that uses technologies in creative and innovative ways to teach the content. So the participants of this study were secondary mathematics teachers across South Carolina. The majority of the respondents were female. The total age range was between 26 and 60, although the majority of respondents were in the 51 to 55 age group. Most of the respondents had been teaching for 6 to 10 years. The majority of them have some sort of graduate degree, and most of them identified as being from or teaching in a rural area. So the method of data collection. I created a Google form that consisted of 60 6-point Likert type scale questions, and the Likert type scale questions were used to collect perceived level of skill within the various theoretical components of TPAC. This was a self-reporting survey, so it was more of a reflection. Each teacher reflected on their own perceived levels. Following the Likert type scale, Likert type scale questions, there were 8 constructed response questions asking teachers to reflect on professional development and use of technology in their district and their schools. And then after that, there were 10 non-identifying demographic information. Method of quantitative data analysis. So once the survey results were in, the data was analyzed, including the mean standard deviation of the survey responses, as well as each component of the demographics. SPSS software was used to generate the results. And an independent samples t-test was conducted to analyze the variances between genders and Title I schools. And then across the other subgroups of geography, age, level of education, and teaching experience, a one-way ANOVA was used to determine if there was any statistically significant differences between the means. The Survey of Pre-Service Teachers' Knowledge of Teaching and Technology, created by Schmidt, Barron, Thompson, Kohler, Mishra, and Schrin in 2010, was modified to accommodate the proposed mathematics TPAC standards and indicators developed by Neese, Renow, Schaefer, Driscoll, Harper, Johnston, Browning, Uzgun, Koka, and Kersaint in 2016. Below is the reliability of the scores and how they're scored. This chart is available online, as well as instructions on how to administer and score the results. And then the content of this survey was validated by having survey items reviewed by numerous experts in the field. The surveys that were completed by the teachers in my research study were all administered online, and all the teachers got the same survey. For the constructed response questions, A grounded theory approach was used to analyze and categorize the qualitative responses. The opinions of all the teachers were gathered, coded, and sorted based on reoccurring themes, concepts, and ideas that were recognized throughout all of the responses. Once everything was coded and sorted, they were examined qualitatively and quantitatively. And the quantitative analysis that was completed was conducted to determine frequency of reported items. So the breakdown of frequencies and gender, the majority of respondents were female, 79%, almost 80% of my total was female, and only 20% were male. In terms of age, like I said earlier, the majority of my respondents were in the 51 to 55 age group. Second would be the 26 to 30 age group. And among the 36 to 40, 41 to 45, 46 to 50, and 56 to 60, it was roughly an equal sample size. For teaching experience, the majority of the teachers had been teaching for 6 to 10 years. A close second at 22% was 16 to 20 years. I looked at the education level in two different ways. I looked to see graduate degree versus undergraduate degree. So only 47 of my respondents had a bachelor's degree. The majority of the people that participated in the survey had some sort of graduate level degree. Then when you look at the breakdown of the degrees, you can see that the majority of these respondents had master's degrees. Now, the area of concentration of these degrees was not asked for, so I don't know what area these masters or specialists or doctorates are in, but the majority of the respondents had a master's degree. Responses to the survey were analyzed quantitatively using SPSS software. The respondents evaluated their level of agreement to each of the knowledge-specific questions on a 6-point Likert type scale, where 1 was strongly disagree and 6 was strongly agree. A one-sample t-test was conducted for each of the 7 TPACK knowledge subscales. The results of this t-test were compared to a hypothesized population mean of 4.0, or a somewhat agree response. Significant differences across all TPACK subscales were revealed during the analysis of the t-test, suggesting that respondents' answers differed from the hypothesized mean of 4.0. Investigation of each of the individual means demonstrated that the respondents tended to agree or strongly agree with the knowledge subscale items. When investigating the mean scores of each of the TPACK subscales, when looking at the 3 main elements, it suggests that respondents are slightly stronger in their knowledge of pedagogy and slightly less confident in their knowledge of content knowledge and technology knowledge. As we look at the intersections where the knowledge areas are combined, all of the mean scores drop below 5 except for the pedagogical content knowledge score. That score remained above 5, indicating that most respondents were comfortable combining teaching approaches with mathematics content. The last 3 subscales were still above 4, indicating that most of the respondents felt somewhat comfortable with technological content knowledge, technological pedagogical content knowledge. and the weakest area was technological pedagogical content knowledge, which indicates that teachers have difficulty in successfully combining content, technologies, and teaching approaches. When examining the group comparisons, I'm going to start with gender, and the results suggest that gender does not influence any of the scores across the TPACK subscales. With the exception of pedagogical content knowledge, the mean scores of the female respondents was higher in every category. However, there were also 261 female respondents, where there were only 67 male respondents. Next, we'll look at Title I schools versus non-Title I schools. So a Title I school is a school that receives additional federal funding based on the number of low-income students or the number of students enrolled in the free and reduced price lunch program that are registered in a school. So the results suggest that working in a Title I school does not influence any of the scores across the TPACK subscales. However, the mean scores of the Title I schools were slightly higher across all the subscales, but they were not drastic enough to be statistically significant. Next, we'll look at the group comparisons of the geographical regions. So, in general, a rural area is a geographic area that is located outside of towns or cities, and they're going to be your least populated area. 247 of my 328 respondents identified as living or teaching in a rural area. And these areas can be seen in the dark blue counties that are highlighted on this map. South Carolina has 7 areas that could be considered urban. Greenville, Columbia, Charleston, Myrtle Beach, Spartanburg, Florence, and Sumter. And all of these cities have more than 100,000 people living in them. 51 of my respondents identified as living in an urban environment, and those are the light blue areas on the map. So a suburban environment would be typically in between an urban and a rural area, and 30% or 30 respondents identified as coming from a suburban area. Despite being the least represented, the teachers that identified as teaching in a suburban area had the highest mean scores across all subscales except for content knowledge. Urban area schools had overall the lowest mean scores except in content knowledge, where they were second to rural areas. Okay, now to look at the level of education. I started off by comparing if the respondents had just an undergraduate degree or some sort of graduate level degree. Now, only 47 identified as having just a bachelor's. The other 281 respondents either had a master's, a specialist, or a doctorate. So the samples are really unequal. So not surprisingly, across all TPACK subscales, the respondents with graduate degrees scored higher. Their means were higher across all 7 areas. The 2 areas that I've highlighted here are the areas where their means were the closest and their means were the most different. So in the area of pedagogical knowledge or teaching styles, there was the least variation in their means. And in the area of technological pedagogical knowledge, there was the greatest variation in their means. Now, if we look at the level of education by degree level, not content area, because I didn't ask for that, but as whether or not they have a bachelor's, master's, specialist, or doctorate. We can see that the master's degree was the majority of the respondents held a master's degree. However, the specialist degrees, 30 out of the 328 respondents had a specialist degree, or in South Carolina, it's called a master's plus 30. But despite being the least represented, they had the highest overall mean scores in 4 out of the 7 TPACK subscales. Now, the 3 scores where they didn't score the highest, those with doctorate degrees had a higher mean. In all areas, educators holding a specialist or doctorate degree scored either highest or second highest, and respondents with a bachelor's degree had the lowest mean scores across all of the TPACK subscales. So when doing group comparisons across years of teaching experience, the 2 least represented groups were groups that had been teaching less than 5 years or more than 30 years. Both of those just had 20 respondents each. However, these 2 groups had the top 2 highest means across all the 7 subscales. So in these first 3 content areas, the 30 plus years teaching experience held the highest means, and those teaching for less than 5 years had a close second. Then when we look at the intersections of the main elements, these have flip-flopped. So now those teachers with less than 5 years experience have the highest overall mean, and those teachers with 30 or plus years experience have the second highest overall mean. Although none of these results were statistically significant, it does reinforce the beliefs that the more experience you have teaching, the more comfortable you will be in your content area and with a variety of teaching styles. Additionally, if you are a newer teacher, you are bringing your teacher training into the classroom. You have fresh teaching styles, you have the newest technologies and how to integrate them, and you've been trained in your content area, and you are more comfortable combining all of these new technologies with content area and teaching styles. Now, when looking at the group comparisons across the subgroup of age, the one-way ANOVA indicated statistically significant differences between the age groups in the comparison of the means of pedagogical content knowledge, technological content knowledge, and technological pedagogical knowledge. So all of these came up as being statistically significant. However, the group sizes found in the data is unequal, and a Levine's test for homogeneity of variances showed that for the technological content knowledge and the technological pedagogical knowledge, it failed the test for homogeneity. So to account for these unequal sample sizes, a Games-Howell post hoc test was conducted to account to further analyze a possible significance. However, upon further investigation, the technological content knowledge and technological pedagogical content knowledge were identified incorrectly by the ANOVA. The ANOVA was underestimated, and it caused a statistically significant difference to be noted when there was no difference. However, the pedagogical content knowledge did indicate that there is a difference in the 36 to 40 age range group when compared to the 26 to 30-year-olds and the 46 to 50-year-olds. So respondents in their mid to late 30s had mean scores that were significantly lower than respondents in their mid to late 20s or respondents in their mid to late 40s. Now, there was no significant difference between these two age groups just when they were compared to those respondents in the 36 to 40-year-old range. Okay, so there were 8 open response questions that were asked. And I categorized and coded the data and then sorted it by the number of responses so I could get a frequency of how many times it had been answered from my, or that answer had popped up from my 328 respondents. So when asked to describe a specific episode where a professional development instructor effectively demonstrated or modeling combining content technologies and teaching approaches, the fewest number of respondents said that they had never witnessed that, and the majority of respondents said that the professional development dealing with any of the STEM activities seemed to be the most effective. So STEM is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics centered learning. And professional developments dealing with blended learning strategies or some sort of Google application or rotation model also ranked pretty high. I should note that 89 people, or about 27% of my respondents, chose to stop answering or stop taking the survey after the Likert type questions. They answered the demographics, but they chose not to contribute to the constructed response. Next, I asked, what do you find most effective about the technology professional development provided by your district? And the majority preferred demonstration and hands-on practice, with a handful saying that that's not applicable in their district. A very small percentage said that was not applicable to them. How can the district improve to better facilitate your technology professional development? More time with colleagues was number 1. So that goes back to that hands-on practice and collaboration. But in addition, modeling and practical application examples. Describe a specific episode where one of your colleagues effectively demonstrated or modeled combining content technologies and teaching approaches. Well, using technology to enhance teaching, those phrases came up quite a bit without a lot of definition. But the other 2 terms that were used often were rotation model and blended learning, and as well as technology to enhance assessment. Instructional games were a little lower than I thought they'd be, but that may just be the people that were answering did not utilize those in their classrooms, or they had not seen colleagues using that as a teaching strategy. What additional training or support do you need from your school in the area of technology training? A very few, 11%, said they did not require anything else from their school. But the majority said content-specific professional development would be most effective, and a close second was more time for assisted practice. And then coming in third was common planning within departments, which would roll into that content specific and assisted practice time. So those could all kind of work together. What can your colleagues in your department do to better assist your professional growth in the area of technology? So the top two responses were share how they incorporate technology and share what technology they are utilizing. And then third is be available for assistance. Describe a specific episode where you effectively demonstrated or modeled combining content, technologies, and teaching approaches. So the number one response was some sort of blended learning combined with a rotation model. Some people considered a rotation model only, and then the third highest response was some sort of presentation using technology. What can you do to improve your professional growth and ensure that you meet the professional expectations created by your district? The number one response was observe others. I feel like that's taught to our students is peer-oriented learning, and so we should take a lesson from our own playbook and model for others to make us become better teachers, and observe others to give us ideas of what to do in our classroom. And those were the top two choices, model for others and observe others. There were quite a few other responses, like attending more math conferences, and then all the other responses after that were very low. Keep up to date on current technology, give constructive feedback, attend more professional development, which could kind of tie into the math conferences, ask for feedback from peers and coworkers and colleagues, and present at professional development, which also ties into that modeling for others. So research question 1 asked, how do the technological pedagogical content knowledge, or TPAC levels, vary across secondary mathematics teachers in South Carolina? So based on the group comparisons of their TPAC scores, teachers rank themselves higher than the mean score of 4 across all of the TPAC subscales. No statistically significant differences were found between gender, Title I schools, geographical area, teaching experience, or level of education. Statistically significant differences were found in the pedagogical content knowledge across the subscale of age, and that was between the 36 to 40s when they were being compared to the 26 to 30 age group and the 46 to 50 age group. But other than that, there weren't really any statistical differences among the subgroups. Again, the data was extremely unequal in terms of sample sizes. The females way outnumbered the males. The age groups had a variety of different respondents. The graduates way outnumbered the undergraduate degree holders. So all of those things factor in to the results, and giving it to a wider group of teachers, administering it to maybe more urban and suburban environments rather than the huge rural environment that it was administered to. All of those things would affect the data. But the way the data came in now, the TPAC levels of the teachers that responded seem to be fairly high, and they seem to be fairly confident in their TPAC in their TPAC level skills. So what technological pedagogical content knowledge is identified by secondary mathematics teachers as essential for effectively teaching mathematics? Well, I just want to point out again that 89 people chose not to respond to the open-ended questions, and more than one respondent commented that the use or understanding the use of technology is different than incorporating that technology into your classroom. Just because you have a strong understanding of how to use something doesn't mean you can figure out or determine the most effective way to use it to deliver mathematics instruction. But essential for effectively teaching mathematics, STEM and STEM activities came up repeatedly, especially in the secondary mathematics level that gets kids engaged and interacting with both science and math. And then the blended learning and rotation models both came up repeatedly. So blended learning refers to any formal education program in which a student learns, at least in part, through online learning with some element of student control over time, place, or pace. And that is easily combined with a rotation model. Many of the examples discussed a rotation model where one of the stations involved a student independently working on their device, while a teacher maybe is leading a small group or administering some sort of an assessment to other students in the class. So a combination of the blended learning and the rotation model was also an effective way of teaching mathematics, in the opinion of these secondary mathematics teachers. Do secondary mathematics teachers feel they are provided with adequate professional development in regards to incorporating technology and pedagogical strategies in the mathematics curriculum? So teachers may have access to technologies, but that doesn't necessarily mean they will have the time to learn how to use these technologies, or the time to figure out how to utilize them in their classrooms. So overall, respondents asked for additional time with which to learn how to use all of the technologies that are available, and further hands-on practice to better familiarize themselves with the technologies. More than half stated that content-specific modeling and demonstrations would be the most effective way for them to improve the professional development, as well as additional opportunities throughout the school year to observe colleagues, both at their school, I guess, and other schools, or just anybody that is modeling and demonstrating secondary mathematics combined with technology and teaching strategies. So the limitations on this research that need to be acknowledged are the fact that this survey was a self-reporting instrument. So responding to the survey was optional. As I said, I sent out 700 invitations and 328 responded. Responses to the survey questions could be exaggerated or falsified. I have no idea of knowing if the way that the people were responding was legitimately how they feel, or if they were exaggerating to either extreme their knowledge of these questions or their opinions. I don't know how seriously the respondents were taking the survey. Were they taking it while they were watching a television show or babysitting a child or cooking dinner, or did they sit down and really reflect on the questions, the open-ended responses, their knowledge levels of technology, pedagogy, and math content? I will not know, because it is a self-reporting instrument, their attitude while they were taking the survey. And from the respondents' perspective, they have no opportunity for clarification. I did not meet them. They did not meet me. We had no interaction other than the survey that they filled out. So if they had questions that were confusing, they had no way of getting any kind of clarification. So qualitative data collection and analysis has its own limitations. It can be time consuming to collect and analyze. Reading through all of the responses over and over and over again can bog you down. Researcher bias to the responses may factor in, and that's something you have to look out for. And the larger the sample size, the more that is going to be an issue. My sample size was not extremely large. It was 328 respondents. But if you had that on a larger scale, like all the states in the Southeast contributing, that would be a massive amount of open-ended responses to go through and code and analyze to look for repeating themes or ideas. Another limitation from this particular study was the sample size. A larger sample size would have probably produced better results. The sample sizes within the subgroups might not have been so unequal in regards to degrees, age of teaching, and perhaps even gender, although I can't say that for sure. Including teachers outside of the state of South Carolina would improve the results and the findings, and collecting data over a longer period of time, not just 1 year, would allow for a wider view of the TPAC scores for secondary mathematics teachers and their opinions on professional development and effective teaching integration styles. So implications for further research. Research for technology in secondary mathematics instruction is limited in its scope, diversity, and complexity. There is research out there, but I think when you're delving into secondary mathematics and how to incorporate technology, there's not a lot of research done in those regards. The exploration of combining content, technologies, and teaching approaches in the secondary mathematics curriculum is lacking, and measurement of secondary mathematics teachers' technological, pedagogical, and content knowledge formed through observation and evidence rather than self-reflection alone. So my survey just dealt with the 328 teachers and how they felt about their TPAC level scores. And as a self-reflection, it's a good tool, but maybe an outside observer would feel differently about how they integrate technology, content, and pedagogy. So a self-reflection survey combined with observations and maybe sample lessons would be a more well-rounded way of examining teachers' true TPAC levels. For administrators and department chairs and leaders of professional development, some implications that this research has shown is that professional development needs to be content specific. Demonstrations and modeling need to be geared towards secondary mathematics teachers if the expectation is they're going to use technologies in their classrooms. Secondary mathematics teachers need more hands-on applications and more time to practice and explore the technologies that have been given to them. And then teachers and administrators need to have an ongoing evaluation of your TPAC levels and then provide more support in the areas where their teachers need it to improve. Thank you so much for your time. I can't wait to chat with you guys on Tuesday and respond to some of the questions you have about my research, and I'll chat with you then. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.